Dualism is everywhere in Elden Ring. Godric the Grafted attempts to ascend to a higher form by gluing the limbs of the dead onto himself. In the Jar Saints, an ancient practice in which the Hornsent whipped the shaman people until their flesh was tender and then stuffed them into jars to fuse them together into one being. In the multiple sets of twins, Morgott and Moog, Miquella, Melania, Darian and Devon, the biggest twist for a player doing their first run of the game is that Marika and her Elden Lord and consort Radagon are the same person. Their fusion is meant to resemble a symbol in alchemy known as the rebus, the fusion of the male and female principle. Dualism is at the heart of Elden Ring. In this context, I define dualism as a reconciliation of opposites, male and female, fire and ice, sun and moon. From a dualistic perspective, seeming opposites actually contain aspects of each other, much like how in the Taijitu symbol, the feminine yin contains a small dot of the masculine yang, and vice versa. Looking at Ranni and Miquella's characters through a dualistic lens, these two characters who seem to be political rivals and complete opposites actually share several parallels. These parallels were made more clear in cut dialogue for Miquella announcing his Age of Compassion, which heavily resembles the speech Ranni gives just before her Age of Stars.
I hereby swear to every living being and every living soul. Now comes the age of our Eden, 1,000-year voyage, guided by compassion.
I do solemnly swear to every living being and every living soul. Now cometh the age of the stars, 1,000-year voyage under the wisdom of the moon.
Both characters also walk parallel journeys as chosen Empyreans destined to ascend into godhood. Miquella and Ranni both sacrifice their flesh as a part of their ascension, but continue to persist in spirit form. The divide between body and soul is another example of dualism present all throughout Elden Ring. For both Ranni and Miquella, after sacrificing their original flesh, they require a union with an Elden Lord to serve as their physical body and consort. Miquella's promised consort is Radahn, whereas Ranni's questline ends in a marriage proposal where she takes her Tarnished on as her chosen consort. Elden Ring is once again performing dualism between Miquella and Ranni. Today, we're going to compare both Empyreans and their intended Age of Stars and Age of Compassion. Just to be clear, we're not comparing them to see who's a better person. They both have positives and negatives to themselves. This is Elden Ring. Grey morality is a given. This isn't necessarily a lore analysis video either. Instead, we're going to try and make a thematic analysis on how the story presents the opposing philosophies of Miquella and Ranni to us, and how both characters are heavily tied to alchemy symbolism. We're not going to deep dive into the lore surrounding these characters, but rather treat them as character arcs. Ranni is a character who experiences positive growth in her arc, whereas Miquella through the DLC experiences negative character regression, which results in his tragic ending. I'll be making an argument why, despite all of the ways in which Ranni and Miquella are similar, Ranni has the potential to succeed, whereas Miquella is doomed to failure. To start, we need to look at Ranni and Miquella in the context that they are both playing the Game of Thrones.
When you play the Game of Thrones, you win, or you die. There is no middle ground.
In the advent of the Shattering, there is no clear successor to Marika. Almost every one of Marika's children that is left alive is making their attempt to vie for power.
But what do we have left once we abandon the lie? Chaos. A gaping pit waiting to swallow us all.
Chaos isn't a pit. Chaos is a ladder.
Ranni and Miquella are playing the game, but they play it in a way that's unique to any of their other siblings. Both Miquella and Ranni rely on shrewd cutting, and their ability to manipulate other parties into doing what they want instead of individual martial strength.
Power is power.
There are 3 known Empyreans, Miquella, Melania, and Ranni. Since Melania is thoroughly in Miquella's camp, that also makes Miquella and Ranni the 2 most likely successors for Marika. They are also characters who have abandoned the Golden Order for different reasons. Miquella is said to have left the Golden Order for fundamentalism due to its inability to cure his sister, and started Unalloyed Gold instead. Ranni, on the other hand, sought to slay the Two Fingers in charge of her to get rid of the Greater Will's influence on her life. They are the only 2 characters who will replace Marika entirely and bring about a new age, rather than just repairing the Elden Ring. To uproot the current order, they are both willing to go to extremes, employing ends justify the means ideology. They are willing to not only sacrifice allies, but the unintended consequence of their plans affect a lot of innocent people. Ranni orchestrated the Night of the Black Knives and the assassination of Godwyn. The shattering aftermath of a bloody civil war is a direct consequence of her action. It's also likely something that she could foresee, because when you remove a clear line of succession in a traditional monarchy, a civil war is almost always what follows. The second consequence of her assassination that night was the Deathroot after Godwyn was buried in the Erdtree. As the Deathroot spread, it created those who live in death, an entire subgroup of persecuted people that the Golden Order began to ruthlessly hunt down. Unlike the Civil War, the spread of the Deathroot is a much harder consequence to predict of killing Godwyn. Yet, Ranni is still responsible. As the orchestrator of the Night of the Black Knives, she shares responsibility for all intended and unintended consequences of that day. Kinslaying is also seen as a particular evil in ancient times. The leader of the Black Knives who Ranni cooperated with is named Alecto. Alecto is a name from Greek mythology. Now, a little disclaimer, I don't know Greek, I'm not Greek, I don't know how to pronounce Greek names, so if I mess these up, then my bad. But Alecto, along with Tisiphone and Megara, make up the Furies, 3 goddesses of vengeance. This reference to the Furies shows just how serious Ranni's crime of kinslaying is, as it ties Ranni's story to the Orestia, a trilogy of Greek tragedies based around kinslaying and the cycle of vengeance. The first play, titled Agamemnon, details the king of Mycenae's return home from the Trojan War. Agamemnon comes home to find his wife is sleeping with another man and plotting to murder him. 10 years ago, before leaving for Troy, Agamemnon hunted down and killed a deer in a grove sacred to the goddess Artemis. Artemis punished him by acting upon the winds, so that Agamemnon could not sail to Troy. Agamemnon then decides to offer his daughter Iphigenia as a human sacrifice to Artemis, so she would restore the wind to their sails. In some versions of the story, Agamemnon even lied to Clytemnestra that her daughter was being taken away to marry the hero Achilles. Clytemnestra has spent 10 years plotting to avenge her daughter. When Agamemnon arrives home, he's ambushed in the bathtub and then attacked and killed by Clytemnestra and her lover. The cycle does not end there because Agamemnon left 2 children behind, Orestes and Electra. Orestes returns home and reunites with his sister Electra in Agamemnon's grave. Electra then reminds Aegisthus of his obligation to avenge their father by killing their mother. Electra, by encouraging the reluctant Orestes, also commits a matricide by proxy. After killing his mother in the completion of the play as punishment for kinslaying, Orestes has the Furies set upon him. He is continually pursued by the Furies in the 3rd tragedy, the Eumenades, until he finally takes refuge in Apollo's temple and appeals to Athena for help. Kinslaying is such a serious crime that Agamemnon's family issues are seen in part as from being descended from the house of Atreus. The house of Atreus begins with Tantalus, who butchered his son Pelops, and then cooked him into a meal and tried to trick the gods into eating him. While Pelops was restored to life, the sin of his father seemed to pass down to his descendants.
Is there no hope for redemption? The answer, sadly, is clear. There never was any hope. They were each of them defective, unhinged from the start. Marika herself, and the fingers that guided her. And this is what troubles me. No matter our efforts, if the roots are rotten, then we have little recourse.
To compare all this to Ranni, Ranni shares several parallels with Electra. Her killing of Godwyn can be seen in part as vengeance against her stepmother Marika, for the humiliation suffered by Rennala after Radagon left her. Both Electra and Ranni push someone else into committing their vengeance. When we find Alecto in the game, she is sealed away in an Everjail. This could be seen as Ranni attempting to escape the divine punishment incurred by kinslaying by preemptively locking away the Black Knife assassins. However, the Furies symbolically pursue Ranni still, as several Black Knife assassins attack Blythe in retaliation later in the game. By the standards of the mythological tales that Ranni draws inspiration from, her act of killing her own sibling is a serious offense and one that warrants divine punishment, which Ranni herself attempts to escape from. Miquella also made the deliberate move to send Malenia to fight Radahn in order to remind him of his oath to become Miquella's Elden Lord. In the midst of their fight, Malenia let the Scarlet Rot bloom, and as a result of the outbreak completely ravaged the region, which means that both Ranni and Miquella are responsible for unleashing a blight, the Death Blight and Scarlet Rot respectively, that infected countless other innocent individuals not involved in their conflict. Miquella and Ranni are both willing to climb on top of a pile of corpses in order to reach their castle in the sky, as both sacrifice a half-sibling on the altar of their ambitions. Ranni used the Knight of the Black Knives to carve half of the centipede-shaped death rune on her body, and half on the back of Godwyn the Golden. Due to this, Ranni experienced a half-death, dying in body but not in soul. Ranni was able to continue living by attaching her soul to a doll, whereas Godwyn died in soul, but his body continued to live on, mutating into this horrible blobfish mermaid thing. Miquella's plans required charming Mog either before or after Mog kidnapped him from the Halig tree. Miquella then used the charm Mog as a part of a blood ritual which gave him and his followers the ability to cross over to the Shadow Realm. Mog's body was then stolen and used as a vessel for Radahn's soul so he could be resurrected. Miquella and Ranni not only arrange for the murder of their sibling, they also mutilate and misuse the corpse for their own purposes. Both show a complete disregard for the bodily autonomy of their siblings, and both are willing to grossly violate those bodies in order to further their own agenda. Miquella's use of Mog's body in particular is described as humiliating by his knight Sir Ansbach.
As if using Lord Moog to gain entrance to the Land of Shadow were not enough, he plans to use his corpse as the vessel of his king consort. He has forsaken Lord Moog's soul. He desires only his empty shell. It beggars belief, but I'm afraid Tender Miquella fails to grasp the humiliation implied by this act. One thing is certain. My dear lord deserved better.
Miquella being the demigod of compassion and whatnot.
Don't you dare approach Miquella the Kind. Needle Knight Ledder, Dryleaf Dane, and our ally will never allow this.
Doing something like this is pretty ironic. The same Sir Ansbach who is remarkably chill if you let him tell you that you yourself were the one who killed Mog.
It was you, wasn't it? Who defeated Lord Moog. Fear not. I bear no grudge against you. His Eminence was felled in an honorable duel, and such are the risks of seeking lordship.
Assassinating a rival competitor is fine, that's just playing the Game of Thrones. But what Miquella and Ranni do to both their siblings is beyond the pale. However, while Ranni and Miquella's use of their siblings mirror each other, I would argue this is where they also begin to differ. They both betrayed a sibling and sacrificed them to get ahead, but the sibling they chose to sacrifice says a lot about the priorities of each character. Ranni strikes at Godwyn the Golden, and the entire Golden lineage as extension. Godwyn is Marika's favourite son, the only son of her union with Godfrey that was born not cursed, supposedly. As long as Godwyn is alive, he's living proof that Marika's Golden Order is still viable. He symbolises the success of the Golden Order, its golden age, its domination over the world. He's also exactly the type of person that the Golden Order privileges, a powerful golden male. His two brothers, Mog and Morgott, on the other hand, represent the underclass on which the Golden Order is built on. They are not allowed to live and instead hidden away in the sewers. The Golden Order is also built on the genocide of the Hornsent and the Giants, the persecution of the Albinaurics and Beastmen. Yet, still, Godwyn standing atop that order is proof of the Golden Order's success. A strong heir and a clean line of succession is proof of a stable monarchy, which is in part why Marika's other cursed children like Mesmer, Morgott and Moog were either hidden away and cast out, because weak children are traditionally seen as a sign of unstable reign or faults within their parents. When Godwyn is killed and buried underneath a tree, he goes from symbolizing the Order's success to representing the rotten roots from which the entire Golden Order sprung from. Ranni's goal was to subvert the Golden Order, which had long grown corrupt, and her way of doing this was intentionally targeting someone like Godwyn, who is in an incredibly privileged position. Miquella shared the same goal of creating a more welcome version of the Golden Order, as Albinaurics, Beastmen, and all outcasts from the Golden Order flocked to his Halig tree. Yet, Miquella chose to sacrifice Mog for his plan. Unlike the privileged Godwyn, Mog is a victim of the same Golden Order which Miquella wants to overthrow. Regardless of Mog's morality, Miquella sees someone who was locked in the sewer his entire childhood because of his physical appearance as someone expendable for his plans. Miquella wants to create a version of the Golden Order that accepts everyone, but is willing to further violate the dignity and bodily autonomy of someone greatly oppressed by the Golden Order to do so.
Miquella the Kind is a monster, pure and radiant. He wields love to shrive clean the hearts of men. There is nothing more terrifying.
This is a pattern that will repeat between Ranni and Miquella. Ranni's plans represent growth for the world, while Miquella's age will only lead to stagnation, due to Miquella's tragic inability to overcome his own character flaws. Another clear difference between Ranni and Miquella emerges in the way they treat the members of their inner circle, their most trusted companions. They both have a group of dedicated supporters. Ranni's questline and the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC both involve extended interactions with both of their NPC allies. Ranni has several co-conspirators she's allied herself with through manipulation, including Celivus and a literal dragon, and also Blythe and Iji, her lifelong friends. Miquella's followers in the DLC are a holy pilgrimage of several people from all walks of life, united under his banner. In other words, Ranni has co-conspirators who are either close friends or people she struck deals with to earn their cooperation, and Miquella has followers attracted to his cause through his charisma. I can list off parallels all day, though let's go into more detail with each character. Ranni and Miquella are associated with opposite imagery. Ranni is associated with the color blue, Karian sorcery, and feminine mysticism. Miquella is associated with gold, Golden Order fundamentalism, and masculine authority. They are also viewed as opposites by the characters around them. Miquella is regarded by all as the epithet of Miquella the Kind. He is constantly described as an all-loving, kindly child messiah. Reading through item descriptions of the base game, there is countless evidence of Miquella's good deeds. including creating unalloyed gold to cure his sister and sacrificing his own blood to grow the Halig tree as a place to offer shelter to all. Radagon's Rings of Light reads, one of the incantations of the Golden Order fundamentalists, a gift of gratitude to the young Miquella from his father Radagon. And yet the young Miquella abandoned fundamentalism, for it could do nothing to treat Melania's accursed rot. This was the beginning of unalloyed gold. Melania's winged helm reads, Melania awaited Miquella at the foot of the husk. My brother will keep his promise. He possesses the wisdom, the allure of a god. He is the most fearsome Empyrean of all. The Halig Tree crest surcoat reads, the surcoat bears the crest of the Halig Tree. Though watered with Miquella's own blood since it was a sapling, the Halig Tree ultimately failed to grow into an Erd Tree. Miquella, going off the base game, is an all-loving savior. The only hint to another side of his character is the mention of his charming power in the Bewitching branch, and his connection to the enigmatic Saint Trina, who appears in dreams to lure people into an unending sleep. However, the brighter the light of Miquella's golden radiance, the longer of a shadow he casts. A lot of Miquella's true character is not explored until the fittingly named Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. If we are to compare the trajectory of the two characters' arcs, Ranni and Miquella, we can see they are reversals. Miquella is introduced to us as an all-loving savior, only to be revealed to be a more morally grey figure in the DLC. We see the golden radiance, but not the shadow lurking beneath. While the game initially frames Miquella as someone noble and trustworthy, we are introduced to Ranni as someone inherently suspicious. A lot of item descriptions characterize Ranni this way, as cold, aloof, mysterious, and tied intrinsically to death. Ranni's Dark Moon. This moon was encountered by a young Ranni, led by the hand of her mother Renala. What she beheld was cold, dark, and veiled in occult mystery. Blasphemous Claw. On the night of the dire plot, Ranni rewarded Praetor Rykard with these traces. Should the coming trespass one day transpire, they would serve as a last resort foil, allowing Rykard to challenge Malekith the Black Blade, the black beast of destined death. She lies to you in her first appearance and introduces herself under a false name. In the same conversation, she asks you if you can summon Torrent. If you lie to her 3 times, saying you can't, she admits that she already knew you were in possession of Torrent, which means she already knew a great deal about you before meeting, and was merely testing you.
I will ask thee again. Thou art possessed of the power, no? To call forth a spectral steed named Torrent. Quite the stubborn one, aren't we? Wise in a way. The lands between are home to lies and cheats aplenty. Perhaps thine ample mistrust will be to thy benefit.
Everything about Ranni's introduction primes you to distrust her, that she knows more than she's letting on. Ranni is introduced as an inherently dubious figure, and she herself invites us to distrust everything she says. Miquella is associated with faith and devotion, Ranni with deceit and doubt. If you follow Roger's questline, you can work with him to attempt to find the location of the Death Rune, and further investigate what exactly happens in the Night of the Black Knives. Roger eventually comes to the suspicion that Ranni is the one who orchestrated the whole thing. Your very first impression of Ranni is meant to make the player suspicious of her intentions. This is further amplified in your next meeting, where she admits up front to being the one behind the Night of the Black Knives scheme. You can even be sent to investigate Ranni on Roger's suspicions that she is the one behind it. Ranni is introduced as the opposite of a golden savior, a dangerous and mysterious feminine figure. Ranni even lies directly to us in the story trailer for the game itself. In the story trailer, she narrates,
It happened an age ago. But when I recall, I see it true.
Ranni recounts the events of the Night of the Black Knives in this
The
way.
ring was broken. But by whom? And why?
We know why the Elden Ring was broke, Ranni. It's because someone decided to assassinate her brother. Ranni even frames herself as a schemer who only deals in transactional relationships. Her behavior changes depending on whether or not you pursued Rogia's questline before meeting her for the second time at Ranni's Rise. If you introduce yourself as someone looking for the Rune of Death, she accepts you as another player of the game. She immediately sizes up that you are only here to look for a rune, but invites you into her entourage regardless. She's almost more understanding of your motivations than if you drop in and offer to serve her, like she's more comfortable in a relationship that consists of two parties using each other for their mutual benefit than one formed from genuine loyalty.
Oh, is that so? Thou wouldst render me aid. Is that thy proposal? Affording thyself opportunity to grope about for the curse mark's location, no doubt. Very well. There's nothing wrong with a well-laid scheme.
When introducing her followers, Ranni introduces them the same manner, not as a band of true friends, but as a bunch of opportunistic schemers seeking to use one another. She even encourages the Tarnished to try and take advantage of them. There's no hint of affection for her allies, even though we find out much later Blythe and E.G. are both lifelong companions.
Ah, yes. E.g. my war counselor, and Salavis, preceptor in the sorcerous arts, can be found below. Like thee, they are in my service. Heed not their peculiarities. Feel secure in gaining from them what advantage thou canst. I am sure the others will be doing just the same.
Ranni is characterized as the complete opposite of Miquella, even down to her most used epithet, Ranni the Witch. In a game laden with Christian imagery, a witch automatically carries dangerous associations. A witch is seen as a dangerous omen. In Macbeth, one of Shakespeare's most famous tragedies, Act 1 is opened by Macbeth encountering three witches, who give him three prophecies of his ascension to king. His ambitions are spurred not only by the prophecies, but by ambitions of his wife, Lady Macbeth, who pushes him to kill King Duncan and also acts as his co-conspirator. We have a long history in the literary canon of framing female ambition as villainous, whereas ambition is seen as just a natural part of masculinity. Ranni being positioned as both a witch and a Lady Macbeth, attempting to seize power for herself, casts a negative light on everything she does. Whereas Miquella's reputation as the kindly Miquella paints him in a much more positive light in comparison to Ranni. Ranni, as a woman, stands in opposition to the masculine Golden Order. She also, by attempting to subvert that order, draws on the mythological archetype of the trickster. The Golden Order draws on several world religions for inspiration, but the two most major is the syncretism between Norse mythology and Christianity that happened between the 9th and 11th centuries. Syncretism is when religions of two regions blend and share traditions. When Buddhism spread between India, China, and Japan, it mixed with local beliefs. If Miquella's character takes inspiration from the Christian side, including sacrificing his flesh on literal crosses throughout the DLC, Ranni's character is more associated with the paganism practiced before Christianity dominated the area. Miquella is characterized as an all-loving savior and Ranni a trickster. The Shattering War takes direct inspiration from the Ragnarok, an end-of-time prophecy in Norse mythology. The Ragnarok is described in both the Poetic Edda and Prose Edda as a giant end-time battle between the gods. There are several steps that lead to Ragnarok. The most significant of these is the death of Balder. Balder is the son of Odin and Frigga, and one of Thor's brothers, generally considered to be the best of all gods. The Prose Edda cannot stop glazing this guy. The second son of Odin is Balder, and good things are to be said of him. He is best, and all praise him. He is so fair of feature and so bright that light shines from him. Balder is so beloved that when he begins to have prophetic dreams about his own death, Frigga gets worried and pulls the ultimate helicopter parent move of going to every object and person in existence and making them swear an oath to never harm Balder. In her rush, she forgot to make the mistletoe pinky swear to play nice with her little boy. In myths like this, there always has to be that one guy who can't help but screw everything up. In Norse mythology, Loki is the reason why we can't have nice things. Loki is at times an ally and an enemy to Odin and the rest of the gods. But one thing is consistent: if there is a big red button that says do not push, Loki will push it. Loki finds the mistletoe and fashions it into a spear, making it the only weapon that could kill Balder. Meanwhile, the Norse gods have all started testing Balder's new immortality. They make a game of shooting arrows and throwing swords at him, and see that nothing comes close to wounding him. The blind god Hoder is feeling left out, so Loki gives him the mistletoe spear and points it in the direction of Balder. Throwing it, Balder is killed instantly. The question is why Loki would do this. The early psychologist Carl Jung would posit that Loki was playing the archetypal role of the trickster, a character who exists to test boundaries and subvert the supreme order represented by the gods. Jung believed there are universal experiences inherent to the human experiences, and these experiences, which he called the collective unconscious, express themselves in archetypes. One of these figures is the trickster, a character who challenges the ruling authority. As Carl Jung once said, the disastrous idea that everything comes to the human soul from outside and that it is born a tabula rasa is responsible for the erroneous belief that under normal circumstances the individual is in perfect order. He then looks to the state for salvation and makes society pay for his inefficiency. As a result of these prejudices, the individual feels totally dependent on his environment and loses all capacity for introspection. In this way, his code of ethics is replaced by a knowledge of what is permitted or forbidden or ordered. How, under these circumstances, can one expect a soldier to subject an order that has received from a superior to ethical scrutiny? From this point of view, we can see why the myth of the trickster was preserved. The trickster has a mythological role in challenging the hierarchical order structures of the mythology of the society they take place in. Jung describes the archetypal trickster as, he is a forerunner of the savior, and like him, god, man, and animal at once. He is both subhuman and superhuman, a bestial and divine being, whose chief and alarming characteristic is his unconsciousness. Even his sex is optional despite his phallic qualities. He can turn himself into a woman and bear children. All of these qualities describe Loki, who not only shapeshifts into a woman 4 different times across the Poetic and Prose Edda, but was also capable of shapeshifting into a mare in order to give birth to the 8-legged horse Sleipnir. There are several parallels between Ranni and Loki. Loki is the father of the wolf Fenrir and the world serpent Jormungandr. Ranni has in her service a wolf named Blithe, and her brother Rykard takes the form of a serpent. Loki is the son of a Jotun, a race of giants. Ranni carries in her employ Iji, a troll, a race who are descended from giants and swore loyalty to the Karian royal family. She is also the daughter of Radagon, who is described as despising his red hair because it resembled the fire giants. Ranni also, like Loki, challenged the strict hierarchical order of the world. The Lands Between was a world without death because of Marika's removal of the death rune. By stealing the rune for her own ambitions and her slaying of Godwyn the Golden, Ranni reintroduced death back into the world. She also killed a beloved son, taking away Godwyn from his mother, the same way Balder was taken from Freya. There is also a little bit of Odin inspiration in Ranni. Ranni always has one eye shut. This eye is missing on her character model. Odin travelled to Mimir's well, amongst the roots of the world tree Yggdrasil. There he sacrificed one eye to the well in order to drink from it and gain wisdom. Ranni also somewhat mirrors this journey by travelling down to the city of Noxtella to gain the Fingerslayer blade, a journey which eventually culminates in her obtaining something of great importance through the sacrifice of something dear to her. Loki and Odin are sworn blood brothers. They represent a dualism of gender between them as well. Scandinavian culture was a time of strict gender roles, but Loki's capability of transforming into a woman challenges that notion by presenting gender as something that can be fluid if you're a god. Odin, the All-Father, is seen as a masculine authority, but in all of his quests for self-betterment is a practitioner of Seder, a type of sorcery. In the height of the Viking Age, the practice of Seder by men was considered effeminate, because it focused on subterfuge rather than the masculine ideal of direct combat. Loki in the Lokasena accuses Odin of unmanliness because of his use of Seder, after which Odin fired back that Loki transformed into a woman, milked a cow, and gave birth to children on Earth, and that's way more unmanly. Culture may try to enforce strict binaries and hierarchies onto human beings, but naturally stories become a place to challenge those ideas and replace binaries with fluidity. Ranni is the fusion of Loki and Odin. She contains masculine attributes like ambition and determination, whilst also being a decidedly feminine character. She is the trickster aligned with the other and the outsider, which is why she's aligned with the uncivilized, the bestial, and the primal. She is Ranni the Witch, the friend to a beastly wolf, mentored by an old crone, and a troll descended from giants. By aligning Ranni with the trickster figure, she is aligned with something considered dangerous and primal to the masculine ruling authority of the world. At the same time, Ranni fights this masculine authority not by conforming to it as Marika did, but by drawing power from her femininity, from her sorcery, and from her intuition. Some of you may be wondering how Ranni is fighting masculine authority if the pinnacle of this world, if the ruling power is a woman. Just because a woman is on top of the power structure, that doesn't make said structure a matriarchy. Like how England did not become a feminist paradise once Queen Victoria took over, or said England stopped being patriarchal under the rule of Queen Elizabeth. A core pillar of patriarchy is that of violence. Subsequently, the very foundation of the Golden Order is violence and death. For her lord and consort, Marika chose a warrior so entwined with the aspect of violence that he had to have it suppressed. Miquella himself, on the other hand, is not so distant from the Golden Order that he wants to stem away from. He is closely tied to his father Radagon and even created several spells of Golden Order fundamentalism. Miquella in his boss fights uses similar holy fundamentalism magic which draws power from faith and religious orthodoxy. Ranni's second title is the Lunar Princess. She is associated more with her mother Ranala. Her magic is based around Karian sorcery, which comes from a matriarchal society. Her spell is called the Dark Moon. By being aligned with the occult, with witchcraft, with womanhood, Ranni is an outsider to the order. Miquella is almost as perfect a son as Godwyn, the most fearsome Empyrean for the job in every way except for one small defect, his curse of eternal youth, or in this case eternal nascency, that prevents him from aging and ever reaching maturity. This is the central theme of his character, and what will be the tragic flaw that will prevent his Age of Compassion from ever coming about. The Shadow of the Erdtree DLC reveals a lot about Miquella's character, but to say that Miquella is revealed to have been a villain all along is an oversimplification of his character. Instead, it frames Miquella as a more tragic hero in the Greek sense. Tragedy was a well-defined art form in the Greeks, as outlined by Aristotle's Poetics. In tragedy, the main hero is no less heroic or capable, but because they possess a tragic flaw labeled a hamartia, they are led to a tragic end. Oedipus was considered to be the ideal tragedy in showing how one flaw in a character can lead to their ruin. The play begins with Oedipus the king trying to solve a plague afflicting the city of Thebes. The plague is a punishment sent by the gods. Oedipus calls the blind prophet Tiresias to ask how they offended the gods. And Tiresias is basically like, you don't want to know, bro. Oedipus then gets angry and throws him out, but then continues to investigate the source of the plague. Eventually, Oedipus realizes the plague was brought about to punish him. Oedipus was born the prince of Thebes, but it was prophesied that he would kill his father and bed his mother. He was left chained on a hill, but a shepherd saved him instead. As an adult, he heard the prophecy and assumed it was about his adoptive parents. Then he showed hubris by assuming he knew better than the gods and could control his own fate and traveled to Thebes. He then inadvertently killed his father Laius on the side of a road and married his mother, the newly widowed Queen Jocasta. Essentially, of all the flaws to have in ancient Greece, the worst is to presume that you know better than the gods. In Greek tragedy especially, the hero's end always seemed predetermined by the beginning.
Ever young Miquella saw things for what they were. He knew that his bloodline was tainted, his roots mired in madness. A tragedy if ever there was one. That he would feel compelled to renounce everything when the blame lay squarely with the mother.
Oedipus's story did not actually end there, as his children, who were born from the product of incest, also all met tragic ends due to, in part, the sin of their birth. Marika's children, similarly, are all born cursed in ways that reflect her sins. Marika wiped out the horn scent, and 2 of her children were born as omens. Marika wiped out the fire giants, and 2 of her children, Mesmer and Melina, are born having seen a vision of fire. Melania and Miquella are both born cursed because they, like Oedipus's children with Jocasta, are born of an incestuous union. Marika and Radagon are the same being, and all of their children come out cursed in some way, as opposed to Radagon's children with Renala, who are born healthy. If we were to locate Miquella's tragic flaw, it would likely be his immaturity, his nascency, as that directly ties his character to the theme of stagnation. It also seems to be a predetermined fate in the Greek sense, as it is a curse he is born with. The nascent butterfly description reads, "This butterfly appears as if it's just emerged from its cocoon for its entire life." A motif is a recurring significant element, such as a repeated image, word, or symbol. Miquella's most frequent symbol is that of a butterfly just emerging from his cocoon. He is placed on Mog's altar in a large cocoon with only his withered hand emerging. Before this, Miquella attempted to create his own Erd tree in the form of the Halig tree by watering it with his own blood. You can see the place where Miquella was ripped out of the Halig tree by Mog, and the site looks like a womb. Mog's altar is also placed on top of a giant pelvic bone, making the cocoon into another womb for Miquella, a place for his rebirth. The cocoon is split down the middle, like a vagina. Blood flows from within the split in the center of the cocoon and pools on the ground in a way that resembles menstruation. Mog emerges from the pooling blood, referring to his ritual as the birthplace of our dynasty. Mog is also called the Lord of Blood and worships an outer god known as the Formless Mother. Mog attempted to grow Miquella inside of his cocoon, and it turned his physical body into a horrid husk. Miquella attempts to do the same, leaving his physical body, and passes through the divine gate, which also resembles a vagina. Wombs and cocoons are sites of birth and rebirth, a place where the transition from one stage of life to another occurs. Miquella is eternally on the brink of adolescence, but is never able to truly grow into manhood. Miquella's lily reads, a delicate water lily of unalloyed gold that has started to fade and wilt, a flower signifying faith in the Halig tree, thought to be beloved by the Empyrean Miquella in his youth. Everything Miquella attempts in the base game is left unfinished. Miquella attempts to devise a cure for his sister, but can only create a needle of unalloyed gold that temporarily holds the rot. He seemed to be researching a way to give Godwyn a permanent death, only to abandon that halfway through, though that one's a bit more debatable. He tries to create the Halig tree as a peaceful alternative to the Erd tree, only for that effort to be thwarted when Mark rips him out. When the main story has started, Melania is able to do nothing more but sit and wait at the base of the tree for her brother to return, while her affliction rots the tree from the inside out. However, you can't just write off all of Miquella's failures as him just being a victim of a curse. If you were to apply a more psychological lens to Miquella, you can see a lot of his shortcomings are also the result of an underdeveloped psyche. Ranni and Miquella are both Empyreans. They are singled out as the most likely successors to the throne. In a way, they are both framed as adolescents. Ranni is a princess, not a queen. Miquella is cursed with eternal nascency. For both of them, seizing power for themselves is also a metaphor for growing into adults. They also both want to grow into better rulers than the parents who raised them. Ranni can be seen almost as immature as Miquella. When we meet her, she is more associated with girlhood than womanhood. The place where Ranni is hidden in-game is known as the Three Sisters Towers. This is likely a reference to the triple goddess, a common deity archetype in neo-paganism. The three goddesses are described as the maiden, the mother, and the crone, the three typical phases of a woman's life cycle. They are also tied to the moon, the crescent, the full, and dark moon. Ranni's mother is the lunar queen, tied to the full moon. Her sister Alana is tied to the twin moons, and Ranni herself was introduced to the dark moon by her mother. Ranni, as the lunar princess, is associated with the maiden. Her body is similarly that of a small, sexless doll that has to stack up books to sit on in order to look taller than the Tarnished. She turns into a smaller doll during her quest and throws a childish tantrum when the Tarnished can see through her ruse.
Oh, a dogged fellow, aren't we? Or is it merely thy habit to talk to dolls? Fine. Fine. I hadn't expected any soul to recognize me in this guise. But now the cat is out the bag. I cannot allow thee thy freedoms.
The third tower in the rise likely belonged to Renna, Ranni's mentor, and is referred to as a crone. Ranni's journey as a character, if you choose her questline, is initiating an Age of Stars, where she ushers in a new era under the guidance of her Dark Moon. The questline therefore has her transition from maid to mother to crone. She starts out as a princess, marries the Tarnished in the way a proper queen of Caria would by proposing to them with a ring and sword, and by the end becomes a wizened crone following the Dark Moon. Ranni even starts out the story characterized as someone more childish. She's openly rebellious, but in a way a petulant child might be. She can even act bratty, snapping at you, lacking the maturity to be emotionally honest about her feelings. You can even see a child's selfishness in her decision to kill Godwyn the Golden, something which had massive world-altering consequences. Was Ranni truly trying to free the whole world from the Golden Order, or did she only care about acquiring her personal freedom from the Two Fingers, no matter what the consequences?
Let us speak of the past a while. I was once an Empyrean, of the demigods. Only I, Miquella, and Melania could claim that title. Each of us was chosen by our own Two Fingers, as a candidate to succeed Queen Marika, to become the new god of the coming age. But I would not acquiesce to the Two Fingers. I stole the rune of death, slew mine own Empyrean flesh, casting it away. I would not be controlled by that thing. The Two Fingers and I have been cursing each other ever since.
Ranni and Miquella are both characterized as being on the precipice of maturity, but if you complete Ranni's questline, Ranni can experience character growth, and Miquella tragically dies shortly after emerging from his cocoon. To answer the question of why one of them can grow and not the other, we're going to look at both characters psychologically from a Jungian perspective. Jung did not see humans as possessing a fixed self, but rather a fragmented psyche consisting of many different and oftentimes contradictory parts. Individuation is a process of self-growth. Jung described in which a person goes through different stages of confrontation and then integration of different unconscious elements of their psyche, represented by familiar archetypes. This process is usually 4 steps: first the shadow, then the anima, then Sophia, and finally a person experiences self-realization. For Jung, psychological distress comes from a fragmented identity, leading to different parts of the self coming into conflict with one another. An inability to integrate the unconscious part of the mind leads to further fragmentation of the psyche. Jung divides the mind into ego and shadow, the outward-facing mask and the hidden self behind it. Robert Johnson writes, "The persona is what we would like to be and how we wish to be seen by the world. It is our psychological clothing, and it mediates between our true self and our environment. Just as our physical clothing presents an image to those we meet, the ego is what we are and we know about consciously. The shadow is the part of ourselves we fail to see and know. The creation of the shadow is linked to a cultural process. Civilization requires us to repress parts of ourselves. Robert Johnson also writes, "We are all born whole, but somehow culture demands we live out only part of our nature and refuse other parts of our inheritance. We divide the self into an ego and shadow because our culture insists that we behave in a particular manner. This is our legacy from having eaten of the fruit of the tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden. While the shadow is often made of what are considered undesirable traits, it is still part of yourself." Joseph Henderson writes, "Just as the ego contains unfavorable and destructive attitudes, so too does the shadow have good qualities, normal instincts, and creative impulses." Ego and shadow, indeed, although separate, are inextricably linked to one another, the same way that thought and feeling are related to each other. The ego, nevertheless, is in conflict with the shadow, in what Dr. Jung called the battle for deliverance. This process of civilization requiring one to repress one's shadow can be seen in Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. Originally a man named Horalu, Godfrey needed to have a lion grafted onto his soul in order to control his violent urges. Horalu was incapable of suppressing himself, so in order to get along with civilized society, he needed the help of a beast regent Sarosh, which took the form of an almost literal shadow always riding on his back. However, repressing the shadow is not enough. True growth can only come from accepting the shadow as part of one's being, which is why we see Godfrey eventually move Sarosh and revert back to his bestial self, as he never truly found that balance. Elden Ring is filled with examples of people failing to find this balance within themselves, the greatest example being Radagon and Marika, where one is trying to fix the Elden Ring and the other is trying to destroy it, even though they are two parts of the same entity. Joseph Henderson also writes, "Usually in mythology, the hero wins his battle against the monster, but there are other hero myths in which the hero gives in to the monster. A familiar type is that of Jonah and the whale, in which the hero is swallowed by a sea monster that carries him on a night sea journey from west to east, thus symbolizing the supposed transit of sunset to dawn. The hero goes into darkness, which represents a kind of death. The battle between the hero and the dragon is the more active archetype of this myth. The hero must realize that the shadow exists and that he can draw strength from it. He must come to terms with its destructive powers if he is to become sufficiently terrible to overcome the dragon. I.e., before the ego can triumph, it must master and assimilate the shadow." Miquella's journey in the shadow of the Erd Tree can be read in that light, as a metaphor for what analytical psychologists would call shadow work, the process of slowly integrating the shadow. The land of shadow is made up of the ugliness of not only the Golden Order but the world as a whole. It's a land of the dead where an unending crusade is waged by a forgotten and cursed son of Marika, the culprit and betrayal of the dragons and his bloodline, the abominable truth of the fingers and the lord of the frenzied flame. The entire Shadow Realm works as the psychological shadow to the lands between as a whole. Jung also saw the 4 stages of alchemy as a metaphor for individuation. The first stage serves as one for shadow work. Nigredo, the blackening, is associated with the process of putrefaction, where a material is boiled and blackened in order to remove all impurities. The putrescent knight guarding Saint Trina can reflect this aspect, Miquella discarding Saint Trina in order to seemingly, quote-unquote, perfect himself. The land is also where Marika's secrets and her original sin are hidden away. While we are not literally traveling in a dream like in the Hunter's Nightmare DLC, we are still going into a journey into what is essentially Miquella's fragmented unconscious. The only access point is by touching the hand of the sleeping Miquella. The DLC and Ranni's questline both feature a journey to the underworld, which can also be seen as a journey into Miquella and Ranni's unconscious respectively. For Ranni, it is traveling to the city of the Nox, an underground city in a dark, wet cavern with free-flowing water. Both characters need to travel to these places in order to gain the wisdom they need to ascend to divinity and become a whole person. They both go on similar journeys, but Ranni comes out her journey whole, and Miquella remains fractured. If Ranni and Miquella are both morally ambiguous figures who ultimately have good intentions and pretty much go on the same journey, then where does the difference lie? Again, this difference lies in the ideas of growth and stagnation. Ranni grows because through the process of individuation, she unifies all the fragmented parts of her psyche. Miquella stagnates because he doesn't integrate his shadow, but rather mutilates himself in an attempt to purify himself. Both Ranni and Miquella experience death and rebirth. They both destroy their physical bodies in a painful manner and then are reborn into a spiritual form. Why do I frame one as death and rebirth and the other as a mutilation? That all has to do with how they treat their respective shadow counterparts. Ranni and Miquella's closest allies can be read as a metaphor for their psyche. In particular, Blythe refers to himself quite literally as Ranni's shadow.
Oh, it's you. It's me, Blythe. Old E.G. trapped me here. Told me I'd bring naught but bale to Lady Ranni. But there's no chance that could happen. I'm part of her being. Her very shadow. I thought old E.G. knew as much. Honestly, I don't know what's going on anymore.
He is a beastman that was given to Ranni by the Two Fingers in order to monitor her. Blythe grew up with Ranni and is considered a foster brother to her. He was essentially created to spy on her, but instead chose willingly to ally with Ranni in order to subvert the greater will. Blythe carries the hallmarks of a shadow character. He is bestial and also a representative of Ranni's greater insecurities, her biggest being that Blythe might betray her one day, as seen in a baleful shadow assassin that takes on Blythe's exact appearance. Blythe is also ultimately not allowed control of his own mind, because the decision to side with Ranni causes him to go insane after she slays her own personal Two Fingers. There is a section in the game where E.G. attempts to imprison Blythe to prevent this from happening. This can be seen as a metaphor for the conscious mind trying to keep the shadow hidden away. However, it's important that this is E.G.'s decision and not Ranni's. Ranni is surprised when it is you and not Blythe who brings her the Fingerslayer blade, which implies E.G. made this decision behind her back.
Ah, it was thee, not Blythe it seemeth. Even in my slumber I sensed it. It is in thy possession, is it not? The hidden treasure of Nokron.
E.G. even calls it a mistake after the fact for failing to trust that Blythe would remain loyal to Ranni. For all intents and purposes, Ranni fully trusts Blythe. Blythe's decision to follow her is by choice, and even when driven mad, he remains loyal to her.
No. I'm part of her very being. I could never betray her, no matter what might happen. Ranni, she needs me.
Miquella's most loyal follower, Needle Knight Leder, can serve as another character analogous to a shadow for him. When you first meet Leder, she is open and trusting, assuming that you are a follower of Miquella right away and inviting you into the realm. Leder is given a special importance in the DLC for a reason. This is all a deliberate developer choice. Leder is on the promotional art, and it is Leder and not Miquella who narrates the DLC story trailer. This is because Leder is meant to represent Miquella's psyche and mouth in a sense, an extension of Miquella, the same way that Blythe does for Ranni. Miquella's followers are also a ragtag bunch of misfits, but this is where the similarities between him and Ranni begin to end. Ranni's main trio are made up of lifetime friends, and her other allies are people she has brokered deals with in order to secure their loyalty. Miquella has gathered followers from all across the lands between because of his ability to charm people. Miquella's charm is not simple brainwashing, but something more subtle. The way he uses his charm on Leder demonstrates this. Leder would willingly follow Miquella, and she remains just as loyal once the charm is broken. The charm does not compel her loyalty, but it does alter Leder's personality. After the loss of the charm, Leder becomes paranoid and immediately decides she needs to start purging Miquella's followers. If you follow her questline, she will attempt to kill the Hornsent and Ansbach. If Blythe represents Ranni's fear of trusting others, then so does Leder. Miquella has charmed every single one of his followers into loyalty, even the four that without the influence of the charm stay loyal and never minded the charm in the first place. Why charm them then? Unless the charm serves as a metaphor for the irony of Miquella's compassion. He has relationships built on real loyalty and love, and yet charms them regardless. He's blinded by compassion, and it ultimately proves to be a detriment to those who are charmed, rather than a positive. One representation of the charm is Miquella's inability to experience the fear of betrayal. While Ranni takes the risk of trusting Blythe, e.g. and later the Tarnished, Miquella removes that risk by compelling his followers magically. If we look at it through a Jungian lens, you can see Miquella's charm as having removed Leda's shadow. If Leda's negative shadow is her inability to trust others rather than integrate that shadow, Miquella uses magic to remove that paranoia. When the charm is broken, Leda has not properly integrated her shadow or done the work of trying to become a more trusting person. Since her paranoia was magically charmed away, she's not able to integrate it properly into herself, and her psyche begins to break down. She experiences no semblance of actual growth from her own self. Miquella does all the quote-unquote work for her. Leda can be seen as a psychological projection of Miquella's inability to trust other people. She is his unacknowledged shadow manifesting itself in the story. Leda also projects her paranoia onto others by deciding they are going to betray her and striking first. Robert Johnson writes, "Unless we do conscious work on it, the shadow is almost always projected. That is, it is neatly laid on someone or something else, so we do not have to take responsibility for it. Blythe is a character created to serve an Empyrean and turn on her if they ever resisted the Two Fingers' plan for her. Not only did Blythe conspire to murder the Two Fingers, but he dies to his last moment struggling to remain loyal to Ranni. Leda, on the other hand, dies because her paranoia leads her to believe the Tarnished have turned on Miquella. She attempts to kill you with all of Miquella's remaining followers, only to lead them to their deaths. However, an important point with the shadow is that it isn't all negative. Leda's paranoia does work positively for her in some cases. We had in fact turned on Miquella and she's right to view us as an enemy. But there are other cases like the Horn Scent where that isn't so. It's a fault of Miquella's charm. Had she retained her paranoia and suspicion before we even entered the Shadow Realm, she wouldn't have invited us in and Miquella's regime would have come to pass. Blythe overcomes his nature. Leda succumbs to her nature. Ranni left Blythe's choices intact. Miquella partially removed Leda's ability to make choices by removing her paranoia via magic. Miquella also fails to integrate the next stage of his consciousness, the anima, into his being. The anima is the feminine element inside of a man, just as the animus is a masculine element inside of a woman. Miquella and Ranni are both heavily aligned with masculinity and femininity respectively. Miquella seems to far favor his father Radagon, as he has no interactions with his mother, and his chosen consort Radahn, being the pinnacle of aggressive, dominating, warlike masculinity, a fanboy of both Radagon and Godfrey. Ranni is protective over her mother R'hllana. She was meant to inherit the throne as she hails from a matriarchal lineage. You can say they both also start out with an unintegrated anima or animus respectively. Ranni has a practically non-existent relationship with her father, likely stemming from her father leaving R'hllana heartbroken and depressed. She traces everything back to her mother. Her only connection with her father was her red hair, which she burned her original body to get rid of, and moved her spirit into a new body made to look like someone else. You can see this action as rejecting her father's heritage to even further align with her mother. Miquella expresses a similar unbalance in regards to his anima, which takes the form of a literal inner woman in the form of Saint Trina. It's not a coincidence that Saint Trina is associated with sleep, and comes to visit men in their dreams, as Jung viewed dreams as the attempt of the unconscious to communicate with the conscious mind through symbolism in the form of archetypes. While Miquella's dual existence is likely inherited from Radagon and Marika's own dual male and female existence, from a Jungian standpoint, she is also Miquella's unconscious anima manifesting itself. Emil von Franz states, the most frequent manifestations of the anima takes the form of erotic fantasy. This crude, primitive aspect of the anima which becomes compulsive only when a man does not sufficiently cultivate his feeling relationships, when his feeling and attitude towards life has remained infantile. There is a reason that discovering Saint Trina means following the quest of Thiolier, someone who seems to take an almost stalkerish obsession with her. All of Miquella's followers are fragments of his psyche used to characterize him. Thiolier reflects Miquella's immature view on relationships, which stems from his inability to integrate every part of himself. Saint Trina has all of the makings of a dangerous feminine. Her long hair gives signs of Medusa. She, like Medusa, is able to compel sleep in men parallel to Medusa's gaze. Drinking her nectar instantly poisons the player character. Emil von Franz states, the anima, like the shadow, has two aspects, benevolent or malefic. The woman can be seen as a lethal anima because she has led Orpheus to the underworld, his doom. Saint Trina is primarily why I frame Miquella's ascension not as a death and rebirth, but as a self-mutilation. One scene from the DLC trailer and the discovery of Saint Trina at the bottom of the deepest ravine in the game both hint at the fact that Miquella pushed his inner woman off of a cliff. Ranni expresses a much healthier reconciliation of her masculine aspect with the Tarnished. While the Tarnished is not necessarily a man, they are still aligned with masculinity. They are referred to as her Elden Lord and consort. They are referred to as the one who walks alongside fire to destine death. Fire, action, heart are all seen as traditionally masculine elements, while Ranni is characterized with snow, passivity, and mind. The proposal scene can be seen as a union of the feminine and masculine. First, Ranni has killed her two fingers and is shown in a corpse-like state covered in blood. She also has shed her clothing, not only showing how broken her doll-like body is underneath, but it is also an act of shedding her outward persona, the clothes of the ego. The ring is inscribed with a warning that is representative again of Ranni's insecurities and doubts. The girl almost literally inscribed, "Marrying me will suck, 0 out of 10 do not recommend," on her own engagement ring. The Dark Moon ring reads, Ranni is an Empyrean, meaning her consort would by rights earn the title of Lord. A warning is engraved within. Whoever thou mayest be, take not the ring from this place. The solitude beyond the night is better mine alone. Ranni and Miquella both attempt to abandon love in order to ascend to godhood alone. Miquella's cross at the point where he abandons Saint Trina reads, I abandon here my love. Both Miquella and Ranni clearly have unconscious insecurities in regards to love, represented by a troubled relationship with their anima archetype. Ranni, however, is able to unify with her animus because she leaves the option to come down with her to the underworld entirely in the hands of the player character, whereas Miquella abandons Saint Trina in what is framed as quite literally severing a part of his being. As one spirit NPC says, kindly Miquella, I see you thrown away something you should not have. Under any circumstances, how will you salvation offer to those who cannot be saved when you cannot even save your other self? There is clear textual evidence of the story that Miquella is not unifying his fragmented psyche, but rather cutting away the parts of himself that he does not like. The divine rebus formed at the end result of the alchemical process is supposed to be a unified male and female, but not only has Miquella cut away the embodiment of his female self, but he's chosen the most childish viewpoint of masculinity, Radahn, as his partner. You could speculate in his character what led him to behave this way. Perhaps it's loathing for his mother that led him to cut off all of the feminine aspects of himself. Perhaps an inability to grow up into a proper man that has left him with a child's idea of masculinity embodied by Radahn. Perhaps it's both. Miquella's fatal flaw is his childishness. Miquella does not know how to reconcile the conflicting parts of his psyche and instead cuts them away, likely because a childish mind like his cannot hold those conflicting ideas inside his mind at the same time. Miquella is selfless in his intentions, but he is also characterized as egocentric. That is, self-involved in a way a child with limited perspective on the world would be. Melania may or may not be charmed, but she still only exists as an extension of Miquella. He demonstrates he cares about her through his acts to cure her, but she also lives for his sake, calls herself the Blade of Miquella, and despite being an Empyrean herself, has no ambitions of her own. She also seems to be another character that Miquella has attempted to aid yet is ultimately left behind, quite similar to Godwyn. The only time she's mentioned in the DLC is Miquella stating her title as we enter to fight him. He doesn't even state her by her name, only the identity she built around him, whereas he states Radahn's name, highlighting what he views as more important.
My loyal blade and champion of the festival. Both your deeds will ever be praised in song. Now, the vow will be honored, and my lord brother's soul will return.
It's also another layer in the irony of Miquella's compassion. It's very fitting if the character who isn't charmed and remains loyal to a fault isn't given as much attention by Miquella than the character who is charmed and most likely wasn't fully on board. Melania is also another feminine figure which Miquella is clearly demonstrated to love, but is left inside a deep hole in the ground in order for him to ascend to the throne of a masculine hierarchy of power. It's no coincidence that the Halid Tree and Stone Coffin Fisher are both constantly descending levels. There's a reason I mentioned the stories of Electra and Oedipus earlier on in this video. The Electra and Oedipus complex are both Freudian terms that refer to a stage in psychosexual development. In the Oedipus complex, a boy sees his father as competition for his mother. In an Electra complex, a girl will see their mother as competition for their father's love, just as Electra conspired with Orestes to kill their mother Clytemnestra in order to avenge their father. There are several points in which Ranni's story resembles Electra's. She conspires with someone else in order to avenge a wrong done against a parent, avenging herself against her mother Marika out of loyalty to Renala. At least I think of it as partly why. She is pursued by a character named after one of the Furies as punishment for the act of kinslaying she committed. Miquella also carries several parallels within him to the story of Oedipus. Miquella is a product of incest himself, and his chosen consort Radahn is an incestuous union. Miquella is cursed like Oedipus from birth, with a fate he tragically cannot seem to do anything to avoid. Miquella also wants to kill and replace his mother Marika, who is also his father. They aren't one-to-one parallels, but there's a reason I bring up these ties to Greek mythology. Freud and Jung both saw these plays as being metaphors for the development of a child's subconscious. The point of the Oedipus complex is it's just one stage of development. A child is supposed to eventually grow out of and identify with their same-sex parent, instead of seeing them as competition for the love of their opposite-sex parent. Ranni matures past her need to avenge herself against Marika. Her motivations shift from revenge and personal freedom to her intended Age of Stars, which will overturn the order of the world. Miquella is stuck in his Oedipal stage, seeking to create an order that doesn't possess the faults of the Golden Order. The death of Marika is needed in order for his age to come to pass, and subsequently marrying his brother, similarly to how Oedipus killed his father, married his mother, becoming the next king of Thebes and essentially becoming his father. Ranni grows as a character and Miquella stagnates. Miquella is almost conflict avoidant by nature, as his charm seems to make people get along by removing the reasons why people would fall into conflict with one another. Conflict is at the center of any From Software game. It is the central gameplay loop: die, learn, overcome. Every From Software game features a protagonist who can die as many times as they need in order to overcome the legends they face off against. This conflict also leads the protagonist to develop from a literal nobody, a tarnished of no renown, into someone powerful enough to directly affect the fate of their world. Elden Ring is also From Software's very first open world game, which adds an element of freedom and player choice to the game's thesis. While I have been talking about Ranni as a central character to the game, her questline is also entirely optional. The player character can fight Radahn without interacting with Ranni. There are also several different endings the player can choose besides Ranni's. Even players who start her quest can leave it completely unfinished, or even betray her at 2 different points. How the player deals and interacts with Ranni is up to them, which means that in order to ascend and get her Age of Stars ending, Ranni must implicitly trust and cooperate with the player. The player can choose negative endings in these games, and yet despite Miquella's questline being framed as a parallel to Ranni's, and the Age of Compassion being a direct parallel to the Age of Stars, there is no option to choose Miquella's ending. In fact, the game never gives any option to follow Miquella's questline. Rather, the player is led there by Miquella's indirect manipulations. Torrent is handed down to the player by his former master, who is revealed in the DLC promotional art to be Miquella, which means Miquella is quite literally responsible for the horse that carries us on our journey. Miquella never offers the player choices the way Ranni does. Instead, he is like an invisible hand guiding you on a journey from place to place in order to suit his ends. The only instance that can be potentially viewed as a choice is Miquella saying, "If you have known sin, if you grieve for this world, then yield the path forward to us." However, there isn't any actual option to join him. The only way in which the player can quote-unquote join Miquella is by him forcibly taking your heart. Miquella requires the player's cooperation for his plan to enter the Shadowlands to succeed. The player must first kill Radahn and then kill Mohg. Ranni gives us quests to fulfill, but this is different. It feels as if the player is almost guided to fulfill the first 2 stages of Miquella's plan by fate itself, as if Miquella is suffused by the divine will, ushering the player forward to help in his ascension. Ranni needs to ask for your cooperation. Miquella simply needs to exist, and the player does exactly what he needs for him to move forward. Even entering the DLC isn't really a choice. Leda assumes that you are a follower of Miquella and invites you in before you can speak for yourself. Even though you journey with the rest of his pilgrimage, you never get the option to side with Miquella. Instead, it's yield.
It was never kindly Miquella, was it? The Erdtree was leading you all along, so that you might ascend to lordship. Why come to these lands to begin with? I suppose it must be what His Eminence, or perhaps the Erdtree, desired all along. The clashing of the favored lords, such that one would prevail. So be it. If you insist upon facing Miquella the Kind, then I will run you through whoever you might be.
Miquella will make you submit by force or remove your free will by stealing your heart. If the central metaphor of any From Software game is conflict leads to growth, then Miquella's pathway can only lead to stagnation. In this way, Ranni and Miquella come to represent the central conflict of Elden Ring. Ranni is the central thesis that conflict leads to personal growth. Miquella is the antithesis. Removing conflict is what leads to stagnation, which is why the parallels and relationships between these 2 characters and all the complexities hidden within might in fact be the most meaningful relationship in Elden Ring. I'd like to give a big thank you to Spooky, who wrote a majority of this video and edited it. This was a fun collab, you should check out her channel, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.